Welcome to the deep dive. This week, we're really digging into Bitcoin. What a ride it's been lately.
Yeah, definitely some significant moves. Our sources, mostly news reports, some social media stuff. They paint a picture of, well, both momentum and questions.
Exactly. So our mission here is to kind of unpack the key events, figure out what's really driving things, the forces behind the price swings, and, what it could all mean, trying to cut through the noise a bit.
And it's really striking just how sensitive crypto still is to the wider economy. That whole reaction to the tariff news, prime example.
Right, let's unpack that. So April 9th, Bitcoin suddenly jumps. We're talking over 7%, right? Up to, what was it, $82,967.
That's the one. $82,967. And the catalyst seemed pretty clear. It followed President Trump's announcement, that 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs, specifically for countries not hitting back.
Okay, so that news dropped and boom, Bitcoin jumps. And it wasn't just Bitcoin, was it? Some related stocks felt it too.
Yeah, exactly. Companies like Coinbase,
Sure.
MRA Holdings, they also saw a nice little boost. It suggests a broader risk-on sentiment shift following that announcement.
So the thinking is less tariff uncertainty equals more investor confidence, maybe. People willing to buy into assets seen as, well, maybe a bit riskier.
Precisely. Tariff worries can really dampen spirits, raise fears about global trade, economic slowdowns. So when you pause that, even temporarily, it's like a sigh of relief for the markets. Less uncertainty, more appetite for things like crypto.
But hang on, it wasn't all smooth sailing leading up to that jump, was it? I remember seeing headlines about Bitcoin dipping earlier in the week, below $80,000.
You're right. Before that surge, things were looking a bit shaky. It did drop below 80
And
tariffs.
what was driving that dip? More tariff stuff.
Yeah, basically the flip side of the coin. The initial chatter and anxiety about potential tariffs, trade disputes, that created the opposite effect. A risk-off mood took hold.
Risk off meaning people selling.
Selling riskier assets, yeah. And that pulled Bitcoin down. It actually hit a low point around $74,000, I believe, before it started to climb back.
Wow, okay. So 74 up to nearly 83. A real roller coaster, like you said.
Definitely a volatile few days there.
Okay, so shifting gears slightly. Another thing that really jumped out from the sources was GameStop. They raised a ton of money, right? $1.4 billion.
That's right, a very significant capital raise.
And the interesting part is what they plan to do with some of it.
Exactly. What's really turning heads is their stated plan to invest, or at least consider investing, a portion of that in Bitcoin, holding it as a treasury reserve asset.
A treasury reserve asset, that sounds significant, especially coming from a company like GameStop.
It is significant. I mean, think about it. A well-known, though, let's face it, recently quite volatile, traditional company saying, we might hold Bitcoin on our balance sheet. It's another sign of potential corporate adoption, maybe seeing it as a hedge or, a bet on the future.
They definitely encourage others to look at it, I suppose.
Potentially, yes. It normalizes the idea a bit more.
So that's the corporate side. But we also saw some pretty bullish takes from big names on social media, specifically X.
Yeah, the sentiment there was quite positive in some influential circles. Larry Fink's comment stood out.
The BlackRock CEO, what did he say?
He made a statement suggesting Bitcoin could potentially challenge the U.S. dollar status as the world's reserve currency. Now, that's obviously a huge long-term kind of statement.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very big picture view, challenging the dollar.
It is.
Yep.
And it carries weight coming from him. It adds to that narrative of Bitcoin maybe becoming something more fundamental in the financial system down the line.
Doesn't there something about payments too? MasterCard?
Right. Separate point, but also important. MasterCard is apparently working on making it easier for merchants to accept Bitcoin payments, infrastructure stuff.
Okay, so making it more usable day to day, less just an investment, more like actual money.
That's the idea behind it, increasing its utility. So yeah, you've got price action, corporate interest, big picture statements, and practical payment developments all happening.
Sounds pretty positive overall then, but
Yeah.
there are always buts in this space, aren't there? Our sources mentioned lingering concerns.
Always. And the main one that keeps cropping up is Bitcoin's relationship with the traditional stock markets.
Yeah.
Its correlation.
Meaning when stocks go down, Bitcoin often goes down too. It's not acting like a completely separate safe haven.
Exactly. Despite all this positive news, the worry is still there. If we hit broader economic turbulence, serious instability, will Bitcoin decouple and hold its value, or will it just get dragged down with everything else? The jury's kind of still out.
And that dip earlier in the week, tied to tariff fears, sort of underscores that point, doesn't it? It reacted just like other risk assets.
It does seem to reinforce that concern, yes. The uncertainty about its resilience hasn't vanished.
So, okay, we have this surge tied to tariff relief, GameStop dipping its toes in, Fink talking big picture. But this underlying correlation issue remains. How do you square all that? What's the overall picture?
Well, I think what's fascinating is this tension, right? You've got the short-term, almost knee-jerk reactions to macro news, like the tariff pause boosting the price. That makes it look like a typical risk asset.
Okay.
But then you layer on these potentially longer-term strategic moves, GameStop's treasury idea, MasterCard's payment rails, Fink's vision. These suggest something more fundamental might be developing.
So it's like it's trying to be two things at once?
Maybe. Or perhaps it's just in a transition phase. It highlights that ongoing debate. Is Bitcoin mainly just a speculative play, highly sensitive to market sentiment? Or is it genuinely evolving into, a distinct piece of the global financial plumbing?
Right. So for everyone listening, this week really kind of captures Bitcoin right now. You had that big volatility driven by global economic headlines, but you also had clear signals of growing adoption, or at least interest, from corporations, plus these really optimistic long-term views from major players.
Exactly. All happening while those background worries about its connection to traditional markets and overall economic stability, well, they haven't gone away.
Which leads us to maybe the final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Yeah, considering everything we've just discussed, the price swings, GameStop, Think, the ongoing correlation. Questions, what does this intense week really tell you about where Bitcoin is headed? Is it still basically tracking traditional markets as a risk asset, or are we seeing the early signs of it carving out its own more independent path in the financial world?
Something to think about.